morning to all of you. So it's great to be here in the CLO Summit and great to be talking on such a topic. And this is part of a track where over the day you will get to know about not just mobile learning, but also how social media and e-learning could be used in learning solutions. I think it's very appropriate that, that this is such a big theme in this year's conference because if you go and read the literature that exists out there, a lot of people are saying that in the next few years, technology will do something disruptive in the learning space. And we just need to look at other industries as an analogy. If you take a look at how the banking industry works today, it's very, very different from how it was 15, 20 years back. Online banking, online stock trading, ATMs have changed the face of that industry. Similarly, if you take retail, with online retail becoming so much more popular, the entire nature of that business itself has changed. And I think it was Jeff Bezos who said that. His vision was not to move traditional retail into online retail, but to bring in disruptive trends that change the very way in which retail happens and how you can use the power of technology in order to make that change. If you compare that with the learning and education space, I think we've had technology. CBTs have existed for time immemorial. E-learning has also been there for a long time. But at most it has been an aid that has supported traditional learning models. But I think moving forward, you will see a lot of disruptive trends which will change the very way in which learning and development is happening. And hopefully, we'll be able to throw some insights on that over the course of this session. Just a quick note on how we are structuring things. The good thing is there's a bit of a balance here. So we have a couple of us who are, so to say, in the L&D departments of organizations. I'm from Mindtree, an IT services company based in Bangalore. And we have Karthik, who's from Wockhardt, and they are into pharma and hospitals. So we have a little bit of experience in terms of what we have done in terms of designing and rolling out learning programs. But we also have Amit and Karthik, who are from Upside Learning and from 24/7. So they're actually providers of e-learning, mobile learning solutions. And that is a certain experience that they'll bring in. So hopefully through the variety of our own experiences, you'll get something meaningful and valuable out of this whole session. What I will do is I will kick it off, given that the whole track is starting right now. I will kick it off by talking about how technology itself is changing the learning landscape. And after that, we will have Karthik who will talk about some of his own experiences in the mobile learning space in 24/7. And then we have Karthik from Wockhardt, who will talk about a particular example of how they have used mobile technologies effectively, in crafting a learning solution and solving a business problem that they had. And we will wrap it up with Amit talking about Upside Learning and how they have worked with various organizations in making mobile learning a reality. So that's how the flow would be structured. We'll take about, let's say, 10-15 minutes each on an average, and we should be having some time for Q&A at the end. Okay? So with that, let me get into my presentation. So let me ask a very basic question. How do we learn? Any thoughts? What are some ways in which we learn?
By doing, observation.
By doing, observing. Any other thoughts?
By reading.
By reading.
Doing it.
By doing.
By observing somebody.
By observing somebody. Excellent. Any
Listening.
more? Sorry?
Listening.
By listening. Very good.
Undergoing training.
Okay. I'm in charge of training in my organization. Usually when I ask this question, training comes last. So people seem to learn in many different ways, but training is often not top of the list. And again, it's not surprising that that came a little later. So this is not a comprehensive list by any means, but these are various ways in which people learn, and I'm sure there are more ways of learning. And some of these were, said by you. I'm sure if I had waited for a little more time, we've had more answers as well. But the interesting thing here is, while traditionally each of these things or most of these things have happened physically, in person, I've done it on my own. But over a period of time, what we're realizing is that some of these things are also increasingly being done virtually. And that is where technology is coming into the equation. So for example, it is allowing you to listen to someone, not just in person, but you can listen to someone who's sitting far away. Or maybe there's a video recording of somebody who spoke many years back that you can still go through. So technology is enabling you to do this in a different way from what it was being done in the past. And of course it works better in some of these methods and less effectively in some other methods. And I think that's something that's fairly obvious from the slide itself. The second question is, what are some of our sources of learning? Now, as you're doing each of these things, what is the source of knowledge that you're tapping into in order to make this learning effective? Any thoughts? Yeah, internet, Wikipedia, stuff that is available on the virtual world. Yeah.
Just get into our past experiences.
Okay.
Read various articles that keep coming in.
Okay, reading articles, delving into your own experiences, excellent.
Applying your learning application.
Okay. Yeah, applying your learning maybe in your work context or in whatever context. Yeah, any other thoughts? So the way I would like to classify it is broadly in terms of content and in terms of people. And in the KM circles we talk a lot about explicit knowledge vis-a-vis tacit knowledge. And explicit knowledge is knowledge that can easily be codified, that can be documented, that can be stored in some form. If it's knowledge that is there with me, I can put it into some form that you can go through. And through that process, knowledge transmission can happen. Not all knowledge can be made explicit, but a lot of knowledge can be. And we have, various sources. Texts have existed, from whenever, but audio, video, multimedia, games. You're finding that the explicit sources of knowledge or content is becoming richer and richer, and technology is playing a significant role in making that happen. Actually, the history of explicit knowledge, how it has evolved, is also the history of technology. Many people say that the printing press was the first thing. It was not about computers or CBT or anything like that. The printing press was the first step in this journey, because that allowed you to mass produce a book. Before that, you couldn't do that. And suddenly that meant that, knowledge that could be codified very easily could be printed, and many copies are available, and immediately the equation between the teacher and the learner changed, because a lot of stuff the book would take care and the teacher only comes in to add more. So I think that was when the process started, but as time went by, as various audio video devices came into being, when the internet allowed you to access this from remote sources, again the equations are changing, and today I think we are in the middle of a bit of a revolution where there is a lot of multimedia animation that is coming into content, which is making it even richer, games, simulations and stuff like that. And I think that's a very exciting journey that's happening. But there is still knowledge which is tacit in nature, which resides in the minds of people, which is very, very difficult to transmit. And I'm sure all of us understand this, and maybe if we want an example, we can go to say a vocational industry person, let's say a blacksmith. How do you transmit knowledge to someone else? And yes, maybe there is a certain technique to how you're doing it, but more than anything else, it's in this person's mind. And if you ask this person, how do you do your job? He may not even be able to explain it to you. What he knows is much more than what he can express. And that is what we refer to as tacit knowledge, which is where traditional methodologies like apprenticeships, have worked very well because, you know, this guy is not an L&D expert like you. But you just work together, and over a period of time, the tacit knowledge is passing from one person to another. Maybe it's not scientific, you know, maybe he says, you know, heat it to this degree, you know, tap there, and that's how the knowledge transfer is happening. But if you look at any kind of learning area, you'll find that there is an explicit and tacit element that is involved, maybe in different quantities, but that would be involved. And typically, for tacit knowledge transfer to happen, a person is required. It could be your own experience, but also people around you, your peers, your seniors, your juniors, your teachers. And here again, technology is coming into the equation. Of course, technology, I feel, influences explicit knowledge much more than tacit knowledge. But with tacit knowledge, at least technology allows you to connect to people who are far away from you. So earlier, if you were only able to interact with a peer who was sitting in the next cubicle or next seat, technology enables you to interact with someone who is far away, 5,000 miles away, let's say. But it is still a people-to-people connection that is happening, and there is a certain knowledge transfer and learning which is happening as a result of that process. So where am I coming to here? The point I'm trying to make here is that the fundamentals of how learning happens, it really doesn't change, irrespective of whether you have technology or you don't have technology. Technology allows you a lot of levers which enables you to do better learning design. And you know, somebody said yesterday, I think it was a gentleman from Cognizant, that mobile learning is like golf. I think that was the analogy. So I think the message was that it's a fad. A lot of people talk about it, but in reality, nothing much happens. And I think this has always been there. When I started off, people used to talk about WAP being used in learning. And you know, I don't hear about WAP for many, many years now. So I think unless we understand the fundamentals of how some program should be designed, how it should meet the need that you're trying to address, we can get caught in one trend or the other, or one fad or the other, without really meeting the goal it's supposed to meet. On the other hand, if we understand these levers and we know what can work well and what does not work well, it allows us to mix things in a judicious manner so as to solve the problem at hand. Okay? So how do you really do learning design? And you know, I try to put it in this form. You pick a method like reading, listening, observing, whatever it may be, right? Which is what I covered. You know, you can pick up any of these words, so to say, and you mix it with a content source. So that activity is performed on a certain source, and this can be done physically or virtually. The way I look at it, you know, this is the combination that becomes a learning method, let's say, overall, or a methodology. Some examples, if you want to do with peer physically, you're doing something with your peers, action learning is probably one manifestation of that. Or let's say if you observe a senior physically, then shadowing is what it may end up being, right? But actually you have, you know, infinite options, or many, many options available. Each of those three combinations in some form or the other results in a certain learning experience. But this is the process of design. You know, design means that there is creativity. You can assemble this in any form that you want. However, you have constraints. What are the constraints that you have? You have constraints of budget. You have constraints of the number of people that you need to take this program to, the medium that you need to use or can use, the content itself. So looking at all these factors, you need to decide what is the most appropriate thing that I will need to do in this particular context. Technology aids some of these things, it may not aid other things, or at least as of now. Maybe as technology emerges in the future, some of these options also may become available to you. So you need to assess, where does technology stand as of today, and how can I use it better? There are some examples of how technology comes in. You know, watching video virtually is video learning. Ask peer virtually is a discussion forum. So many of those kind of social interactions, the way we call it, I would imagine would interact there's an action that you're performing on some tacit knowledge source, and you're using a virtual medium for that. You know, nothing much is different. It's just that you're able to do it virtually. Now, for some things it will work, some things it will not work. And I think that's where we need to go through a process of design. Just a few examples from the world around us where technology seems to be making some disruptive change in the learning process itself. A lot of stuff has recently been written about adaptive learning, organizations like Newton which are there in the space, and many people say that this could potentially become a disruptive trend. And the crux of this is, I'm sure some of you are familiar with adaptive assessments which have existed for a long time, especially in the multiple choice question format, where depending on what answer you have given, further questions are asked. Either it becomes more complex or less complex. It goes on to another topic or it stays in the same topic. And through that they say that the efficiency of the assessment becomes much higher. Let's say just by answering say 15 questions or 20 questions, you have the same efficiency that you would have had if say someone were to answer 60 questions, and you're able to rate this person across a much larger spectrum. That's where it becomes useful in the adaptive assessment space. But a lot of people are talking about adaptive learning, where it's not just e-learning content that is used, but you provide e-learning content as necessary to an individual depending on the usage patterns. It's personalized in nature. So I see that in some form or the other, this can become a real disruptive trend in the way we have managed learning. Somebody spoke about MOOC in the morning, and again that's something that you read a lot of press about, edX and stuff like that. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, a lot of universities around the world are making all their content available online. And not just that, I mean, it's fascinating. If you go to the edX website, you can go through a course on, say, computer science or robotics or Beethoven or virtually anything under the sun. The sessions are done by the best faculty from Harvard and such institutes. But the way they run it is also very interesting, because, for example, you can just register for the course, you go through the course, once you complete it, you go print the certificate, and that's the end of the story. So it's all done by you. So it's a very, very different model from what we've had in traditional universities. But for example, the way they bring peer rating into the equation, how is it possible for a professor to support, say, 100,000 learners who are going through a certain content? How do you assess or certify someone at the end of that? You can't scale and do it for so many people, which is where they bring the peer rating system into the equation, and that's how these certifications are awarded, which is again a wonderful innovation. So people are dabbling with different elements of this design. Khan Academy, I think all of us know about Khan Academy. There's a very nice book written by the author Salman Khan, which is a beautiful book on how technology can be used in the learning design process. And it's beautiful the way they have experimented the Khan Academy model in various schools. Of course, there is the Khan Academy platform, but with the support of the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation, they have also taken up a lot of schools, and the Khan Academy content is being used in those schools. And the most beautiful thing there that they talk about is that people actually go through the videos first. So you kind of do your classwork at home. That's how he puts it. And then while you're in the class, they're actually doing assignments and stuff like that. So the homework is actually done in class. That's the reversal that they talk about, and they say that that's much more effective because all the explicit stuff, going back to my earlier slide, you learn through the videos, and increasingly through technology, more and more stuff which is explicit can be done through technology itself. But what is beyond that, the tacit part of it, that's what you do together in a class, and that's how you can get greater value. And of course he talks about many other benefits that you can get out of something like this, because he talks about fast learners, slow learners, and how each of these things help each of these groups that you would be having in a typical class, let us say. Better design content as well, simulations based on video games, which are also, I feel, it's very interesting, because that's where a little bit of the tacit part is coming into the explicit content itself, because through simulations, games and stuff like that, some part of the tacit knowledge process is coming into explicit. So it will be interesting to watch the space and see how that evolves. So the broad message that I want to leave you with is technology can make learning faster, cheaper, better, but you'll have to apply your mind. There is a lot of stuff that you can do. People are dabbling with some of those concepts. It's very early days yet. Again, don't use it as a fad, but look at the problem that you have on hand, decide how you can use technology, what learning method you want to use, how you can design something in order to solve the business problem. And when we come to the Wokhart case study, you'll find that it's not about using the most fancy thing that goes around, but it is about doing what is relevant with the options that you have to solve the problem that you have at hand. Thank you.